Okay, thanks everyone. This is the plan meeting for the 29th of May. And if anybody's watching the recording, we started this with no technical difficulties whatsoever. The first thing I wanted to bring up, which I don't think we need to discuss, but we can discuss if we want to, is that Nick Thomas from Create made a suggestion to move planning to happen twice monthly instead of monthly. In plan, we experimented with something a little bit similar a while ago, and I've commented to that effect in the issue. But I think it's an interesting idea, and I'd love to see something like that happen where we can be sort of more continuous. Anyway, we do have the delivery team are working on a thing where we will be deploying to GitLab on a sort of continuous delivery basis as well. So it'll be good to get everything sort of aligned around that model rather than the monthly sort of big bang model we kind of have at the moment. Yeah, feel free to jump in if you had a question about that, but otherwise I'm going to move on. The next thing is...
Can I ask a question then?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
What is the main difference between the monthly meeting and this meeting that we are having now, which is weekly?
So there is no monthly planning meeting, just to be clear, but like what Nick means is the process of planning. So for Create, that might be a meeting. For us, it's normally a few messages on Slack or in this doc or whatever. But ideally, like, once a month, Donald and I have to go figure out how much capacity we have, like how much we think the issues in a release weigh. Eric has to figure out like what priority these issues go in. And when Donald and I say we don't have enough capacity, which issues to cut sometimes. So if we do that in smaller chunks, the idea is that it will be less painful. And kind of on that subject, this might be calling it a bit early, but the plan backend board doesn't have much left in the unassigned column at the moment, which is great. So there's like 6 issues there, but like 3 of them have a weight of 1. So that could be done pretty quickly. There are quite a few features in 12.1, which I meant to link to here, but then I forgot. So I'm just going to find that link now. But if there's anything you want us to start work on, we might not be able to bring something into 12.0 from 12.1, but we can certainly get a head start on 12.1 with some of these things, I'd imagine. Then, yeah. And you don't have to answer in the call, but we can certainly talk about it in the call too.
Yeah, that would be great. Two things kind of come to mind. First is the WIP line, and then the second one is bringing multiple boards down to core. Although I think there was someone from the community that mentioned they wanted to work on that, but I don't think I've seen anything come through yet.
Yeah, I think it's fine if someone from the community wants to work on it, but also like if we want to do it in a particular release or by a particular release, it's better for us to do it or like, make sure we have the control over it. So that's fine. Yeah, let me just make a note of those 2 there. Okay, so the board list capacity line, I didn't read it, but I did see Alexis had done quite a lot of like thinking on this one. I guess that's sort of that's still the pending part there, whereas the multiple issue boards for projects in core is sort of it's very well defined, right? Like someone could start work on that and they wouldn't hit any roadblocks. So yeah, I'll share those with the team and see. I won't change the milestones on the issues right now because that's one thing that isn't great about this model is that like everyone will get a notification. So we bring this into 12.0 and then we push it out, and we always knew that like we can add a comment, but it's still like not ideal. So I'll wait until we actually need to do that. But I think those are 2 good ones. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And also having an engineer look at the capacity line issue is going to be useful anyway, because even if it's not quite ready to implement, they might have some thoughts as well that might help clarify like what's smaller scope and what's bigger scope in this context, because Alexis had a few sort of different suggestions there. Donald, the other thing is I don't know if front end's in the same situation, so that might make things tricky as well.
Yeah, because even if we get to a point with the capacity line where it's ready for dev. I don't think we're quite in the same boat as backend, in that I don't think we have any extra capacity for 12.0 for front end stuff. But if we can get something, like you said, if we can kind of treat something as a spike and start looking at it in 12.0 for the capacity line, that might be helpful on the front end side to start at least putting together a plan for how we want to take that on in 12.1.
Cool. Yeah, and Annabelle, if there was anything in there as well that you thought, like, you know, we should be, or we can bring this forward, like, feel free to say, although I know you've not been working on plan stuff exactly lately because you've been working on the other Epic, which I've forgotten what it's called. The beautifying the GitLab UI or something. Is that the one?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if for front end, I know there's not more capacity, but I think that we should maybe prioritize the drag and drop if there's any front end resources instead of the board capacity line, because I'm kind of wondering if we want to still hide the Epic tree behind a feature flag. I'm a little worried that customers losing the ability to reorder their issues in Epics is going to be kind of a big deal. It's going to be a whole 30-day period where they can't order anything. So I was hoping that the drag and drop could be merged at the same time, or at least they could be released at the same time.
This is the drag and drop for the epics in the tree view. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the next point on the agenda.
Okay,
So,
cool. Well,
I don't have anything else for point 2.
Let's hand over to Kushal then and ask him about that.
Yeah, so Epic Tree MR is still pending to be merged. It missed 11.11, and there is a related enhancement, like Annabelle mentioned, regarding the drag and drop, because current implementation, we have epics and issues list separate. Both of them allow user to drag and drop items, but for tree, we didn't decide to do drag and drop, at least in initial iteration. But since it missed the release, Annabelle suggested like we should rather get the drag and drop included in the main feature and then push it to the public. So if we were to release the tree as a part of a feature flag, either a cookie flag or a proper feature flag, then we can maybe have the drag and drop implemented in 12.1, because in any case, doing drag and drop within 12.0 is not possible now. Because the tree apps code is still not in master yet, and we are already at 29th of the month, so we don't have sufficient time to get the drag and drop working, and that would be a significant effort. So if we were to have the drag and drop along with the tree before we make it available to the wider audience, I'd rather have a feature flag in place and then do it in 12.1. And once drag and drop is functional, we basically remove the feature flag and make the tree app fully available within 12.1 itself.
So just so I understand, Annabelle, the concern is that if we add it without the drag and drop, people won't know the drag and drop exists when we add it in future. Is that right?
Yeah, that and the fact that people add issues to epics currently and then they're able to order them, let's say in priority, however they want. Once we implement that tree, you can't do that until the drag and drop has been added in the next release. And I'm worried that people are going to be the workflows might be disrupted if they can't drag anything for a whole release.
Right. So Kushal, do you know what dependency you have on backend for the drag and drop? Because I assume that that's not something you get by default in the current MR, right?
Yeah, so the current MR only adds the backend for the GraphQL to get the nesting working, where making just one call would give you both epics and issues for a given epic. As far as drag and drop backend is concerned, we already have support for drag and drop, but that was for the flat list. Now with the tree in place, we would need to cover scenarios where you can basically drag an item from one subtree into another one. If at all we want to cover it, I believe we want to. So for example, if I were to drag an item which is in one subtree and drop it over to another subtree, we would basically changing the relationship between those epics while the item gets dropped. So that requires a backend support as well, because right now we only support providing like the indexes, like where exactly within the list we want that epic to be ordered into. And that is a very basic backend that we have for getting the drag and drop in place. But if we were to change the relationships, then we would need further backend support to make it all working. Which is why I say it, like if we were to implement even the basic drag and drop, then that wouldn't be possible for 12.2 because it is significant both from the front end as well as the back end.
So, sorry, I'm just still asking in the asking questions stage here. My recollection from the existing MR for the Epic tree was that we couldn't put it behind a feature flag because it was difficult somehow. Has that changed, or is that still difficult?
No. So what happened was in last release where this was supposed to go in 11.11. Adding feature flag was suggested like on 5th or 6th of the month. So we didn't have sufficient time to get all the flags in place for both the front end and back end. But if we decide now to have the feature flag, we still have sufficient time to implement it. I can ask Brett to have the feature flag back end ready, and we can put those checks in place within the front end so that we don't remove the flat list as long as feature flag is true. But yeah, that was something that came up very last in the development phase. It didn't decided early on while we started working on this feature.
Okay. In general, I think we probably should be thinking about feature flags for features like this, like from the start, just because we might get into situations like this. The other thing is that, as I recall, our feature flag guidelines, we can pick something into the stable branch after the freeze if it is behind a feature flag. But I don't know if that gives you sufficient time there. And I also am trying to remember what the transition document says, because I was talking about this transition to having continuous deployment, which I'm going to link to in the agenda as well. So I think that might affect it too. But I guess the question is for Annabelle and Eric then, like, do we want to spend the extra time to put this behind a feature flag so that we can at least merge the tree and then still work on the tree without having to like block it on the drag and drop, and then remove the feature flag once the drag and drop is also implemented and working?
I like that idea, just because I don't want to remove functionality and then hope that the drag and drop will be finished in one release. So if you need to spend more time implementing it with the feature flag, I think that works for me. But I don't know if we've already set up the, release post or anything like that and announced this feature.
No, we haven't done that yet. That'll happen near the end of June, like June 15th, we'll start around there. I like that idea too. I'd like to understand, Annabelle, like the link between the display of the tree and the drag and drop functionality. It seems a little bit counterintuitive to our MVC and iterate approach. And so
yeah.
Would you mind kind of elaborating on that a little bit?
Yeah, I agree. And I like the idea of implementing these iterations, but I'm not in favor of removing functionality, which is what we're doing. Since we couldn't do dragging and dropping at the same time as implementing this tree, I mean, that drag and drop is going to be a significant effort. It's much more complicated, as Kushal was explaining, than just dragging within the issues list. I just want to make sure that our small primitives aren't removing functionality, is kind of what it boils down to.
Can we have both views for a release? So like you have the like list view and because we have to have both views in a feature flag anyway. So like, why can't we let people choose and just have the tree view be read only for a while?
Yeah, that is another option. I think that's a little confusing why we would have it in two places, but it's definitely something we can explore.
I wouldn't suggest on having both of them in place if we were to do it read only, because that would mean that a handful of changes on the tree app itself, where we want to remove all the right functionalities within the tree, like we would have to hide the remove button for each list item. We would also have to hide the header actions, which allow you to add epics and issues to the list. That would mean we would also be hiding ability to create child epics, which we added along with the tree. So it is like adding flags to a bunch of places just to make that entire tree read only. At the same time, if user is allowed to make the changes to the list of child epics or list of child issues, then user would have to first go to the upwards in the page and then add all the epics and child issues, then scroll further down and see if the tree shows up all those newly added epics or issues. So as Animal mentioned, it is only going to confuse the user. So I would rather have so I'd rather have the entire tree tab show up only when we remove the feature flag and make it first party app and then remove the older implementation. And as long as we don't have drag and drop in place, that entire tree tab remains behind the flag, and we continue working on finishing it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I'm glad you explained why it was a bad idea, but I definitely agree that it's a bad idea.
Yeah. I guess my thought was like to have them side by side, but based on Kushal, what you just mentioned, technically that sounds challenging. I also agree it's not a great experience. We've run into this like on the create side as well. We have got two editor buttons like side by side. We've got the ACE editor, we've got the Web IDE, and that's like a confusing experience. Although it also is something we've lived with for a very long time. And so it's not necessarily unprecedented that we've done that. But I think, I guess going back to number 2 on the agenda. So Sean, if there's extra capacity, then yeah, I think in general, I agree with what Annabelle is proposing here, that like we should not touch either of the 2 issues I talked about, but we should focus on Epic Tree dragging and dropping. This is the really important functionality for like an incredibly strategic customer of ours that they've been asking for since January. So yeah, we should focus on this one.
So just to be clear, this is issue, I'm just going to put the link in the Zoom chat just for the sake of speediness. This is this issue, right?
Should be 9367.
Yep, that's the one. Okay. So yeah, I think, so this was down at the bottom of the backend board because it was blocked on the other one, but I can add a comment to say that from a backend perspective, this isn't blocked as long as the backend for the Epic Tree view is merged, or is, it doesn't even have to be merged, as long as it's like stable, which I think it is. I think Brett's just fixing up a couple of final things before that gets merged. We can start work on the back end of this and like supporting that, and like we can talk to Kushal about how we do that, and then at least we're not blocking ourselves on like, you know, Kushal starts ready to work on this and he needs backend to go but do a bunch of stuff, and backend have been doing all this other stuff instead because they thought this was blocked. Like, you know, we can at least get ahead for that. So I'll add a comment to that effect, basically saying, you know, we should, as a backend team, pick this up, even though we can't finish the feature right now because it's blocked on another thing. We can do the backend side of it early, and we can work with front end to make sure that it works in the way that they need, so that when they come to implement it, it's going to work. It's going to go much faster.
Yeah, and here's what I would suggest as far as this MR for Epic Tree is concerned. I'll basically revert that one file which removes the original epics and issues list, and would basically make sure that we see both the flat list of issues and epics as well as the tree tab, and then so that this MR gets unblocked, because we don't want to further block it by making the feature flag related changes. And once this gets merged, we open another follow-up MR right away, which basically adds a feature flag that would just hide the tree tab, so that we don't have to remove anything else from the UI. We just do the changes related to feature flag in a separate MR, so that this MR doesn't get blocked, because it has already been a while waiting for getting this approved and reviewed. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, and Brett's already split out, I think, 2 MRs from this MR. So I think splitting out another one makes sense. Just so I understand though, when we merge it before we've added the feature flag, what happens?
So right, once this MR gets merged, after I do the changes, I'll as soon as the call ends, I'll revert that one file which removes the older epics and issues list from the page. So what you would see once this gets merged into master is that whenever you open a new epic, you would see epics and issues list as it is within the page body. And below that, we would have 3 tabs: discussion, tree, and roadmap. And clicking on tree tab would show you exact same issues and epics, but in a tree format, like we have within this feature. So you would see basically both things at once. And once we have the feature flag MR open, within that MR, I would introduce that feature flag related change, which would hide the tree tab entirely. And user would then see just the older implementation of issues and epics list. That is it.
Okay. Yeah, no, as long as, so adding a feature flag afterwards is kind of the opposite way around to the way we normally do it, but I think it's fine as long as the intermediate state isn't terrible and we get the feature flag in quickly afterwards, because you know, I think that's pragmatic in this case. But I just wanted to make sure that that would work and it wouldn't be like horribly broken until we added the feature flag, in which case, like, you know, we shouldn't merge it in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key thing, is the getting the feature flag in as soon as possible afterwards, because we don't want to accidentally get to a state where, you know, having a feature flag is pointless, because we end up with the feature out in
right. Yeah, we just released it. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, and then Kushal, just to talk through kind of your priority, once you get that done, the feature flag, the drag and drop, let's treat that as the highest priority. I know you had some geo work. Maybe I'll reach out to Rachel.
Yeah, so the GeoMR can wait for another release. It is more of a technical debt, so we don't have to do it on priority. I'll get the drag and drop sorted before I start working on any other thing. Maybe I can include the follow-up items like we discussed in our one-on-one today, where we had some follow-up changes to the tree app itself. Maybe I can cover those along with the drag and drop related changes, and then we can push out the whole thing in 12.1.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay, I think I have the next point. I was just gonna let the team know that the Beautifying UI Epic is not just last week, it's through the 7th. So I'll continue to have somewhat limited availability. And so if there's any new plan-related questions, please reach out to Alexis. But for the issues I'm already assigned to, I'm still going to continue working on them. Like today, I'm going to spend the whole day making sure that the drag and drop is in a good UX-ready state. And yeah, that's it. It's supposed to be 75% capacity towards this epic, but it can fluctuate based on what we need.
Cool. I already added a note to the retro. I think actually Heinrich added a note about like that epic, and I just added a note that like when we come to do the retro, I'm really interested to see how you felt that went, because I'm quite happy that we're doing it, certainly.
Yeah, I think it'll be useful. Fix a lot of tiny bugs that I'm sure are annoying everyone.
Cool. That's the end of the agenda. I'm just going to stop recording and then mention one last thing.